Merry Draft Eve, everybody. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. I'm Anthony Cosenza, and we are upon the biggest weekend, or one of the biggest weekends on the NFL calendar, as the NFL Draft is just around the corner. And we are here to preview all things NFL Draft, all things Cincinnati Bengals in the NFL Draft, because it's a big weekend for the Bengals. They have 11 picks as they currently stand. 4 of which are in the first 3 rounds, and they've got a lot of work to do. They did some good work in free agency. They've got a lot of work to do from there. I am joined by my usual partner in crime, Scott Schulte, in the Ohio area. Maybe the Bengals take some Ohio State players, my friend. What do you think?
It's possible. I mean, it depends. Yeah, it depends on who and where. I am a Buckeye fan, but I'm not going to say all Buckeyes all the time when it comes to the draft, because yeah, some are better than others. And I like how you mentioned Draft Eve, because it is kind of like Christmas. I mean, you have those 11 unwrapped gifts, and so you're kind of looking forward to, hey, who are we going to get? I'm hoping to get that, Nintendo and that bicycle, and not just a bunch of socks and underwear. And, I think with Paul Alexander gone, I think fans are a little more excited to get maybe a few more, although there's still Marvin Lewis. So yeah, it's very, very exciting time to see what those presents end up being tomorrow night.
What's Marvin Lewis? Is that like the equivalent of giving something up for Lent, or something you'd like for Lent? The fact that he's back, I don't know. I see you're wearing a Toledo sweatshirt, my friend. Or not, was it Toledo? Dayton.
It's actually Dayton, University of Dayton.
Dayton, okay. So I just a little side funny note. I don't know if you saw this. Our good friend Rebecca Toback with CincyJungle.com put this just kind of in our internal chat, and she had said something that the University of Toledo had put out some sort of tweet that they were going to, if they got 500,000 retweets, that they would change their mascot to Shrek. And apparently, in a matter of not a lot of time, they were coming very close to that milestone, and they deleted the tweet. I didn't know if you heard about that, but I thought that was pretty entertaining that they would do that. Maybe there's some sort of copyright infringement, given the fact that Shrek is a DreamWorks character or something. So maybe there was something there, but I just didn't know if you heard about that. I thought that was pretty entertaining.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, they are the Rockets, and you figured Toledo is the, I assume the capital of rocketry, apparently. I mean, so one of the things you kind of wonder where they got the name from, but I'm not sure Shrek really fits either, but Bengals are saying Bengals, so.
No idea where they came up with that idea, but they did it, and it gained real big traction, and then they kind of had to shut it down, which I thought was pretty funny. A couple of announcements for this show and for the weekend ahead. We'll be joined by ESPN Cincinnati's James Rapien in about 20-30 minutes, I believe. Should be joining us about 9 p.m. Eastern to talk about the Bengals. He obviously has a little bit of inside knowledge about what the team is doing, and he has been breaking down on his own podcast and on ESPN Cincinnati stations about what the Bengals could do, will do, should do, all that stuff. So we are excited to have him back on. It's been since, I think last summer that we had James on the program. So it's great to have him on. And, being who I am, I got a hold of him last minute. And being who he is, he obliged and is joining us. So I'm pretty excited about that, Scott. I'm sure you are as well, because he brings great insight and obviously knows the team well and the local market well. Just another side announcement I want to let you know, because we're not going to do a live show, unfortunately. I wish I could say we could, but given some other obligations, both personal and actually, Scott and I are, at least I am. I think Scott will chime in there this weekend as well. We're doing some work for the CincyJungle.com site, so check out and stay tuned there for a ton of news, analysis, the draft picks, all that kind of stuff. We'll be doing some stuff there. I will be doing, so night one, Rebecca Toback will be doing a Facebook Live session. If you're on Facebook and you have not liked the Cincy Jungle page yet, do so. She will do a Facebook Live video session breaking down the pick on night one, whoever that may be, what the Bengals do, what's ahead, all of that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be putting that video on our YouTube channel and our SoundCloud channel. So if for some reason you can't join those Facebook Live sessions, which I hope you can then get the material on our YouTube channel, the video itself, and the audio through iTunes. I will be doing the Facebook Live session at least after night 2 after the Bengals are slated for 3 picks. Those videos will be up on our site, as will another Facebook Live session video that I'll put up on the channel. So if you're unable to join the Facebook Live session, you can either get it on the Facebook page and watch the video there, but I'll also have it on our Orange and Black Insider page, YouTube page, SoundCloud page, all of that. And obviously it'll be on iTunes as well, so you can download it there if you're unable to get it. And also, if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to our SoundCloud channel, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate it. We appreciate all the downloads we've been getting so far. And for all the live viewers, we've got a number again tonight, and I'm sure we'll be getting more as the night goes on. So stay with us. We've got a lot to talk about. James Rapien from ESPN Cincinnati is going to be joining us. We're excited about that. Scott.
Yes.
You, sir. I'm going to give my mouth a break here. That was kind of a mouthful, my friend.
I have some lemonade for you. It's not real.
Okay. All right.
My son gave me.
All right. Okay. Well, okay. You have put out a couple of really good posts. They went up on the CincyJungle.com site on Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and it was basically a lot of it was all around centering around the offensive line, if you want to use a pun there. I guess where we'll start, you had, and this I thought was very interesting, you had talked and broken down the centers that have been drafted over the last 20 years. And, it's funny, you go 20 years, okay. I mean, I saw a name on there, Damian Woody, and I'm like, oh, wow, gosh, that was 20 years ago. And, very good player for a number of years. And it's just funny, you see that name, and you're like, gosh, that was 20 years ago. I can't believe it. But I just want to get your take a little bit, and for those who didn't read it, break down a little bit about the value of drafting a center in the first round. Obviously, if the team values a guy in the first round, they have a first-round grade on him, you got to take him if he's there. But Frank Ragnow, James Daniels, Billy Price, the big three seem to be guys who could be in play at 21. So talk about that post and how it relates maybe to those 3 guys this weekend.
Yeah, this is one of the amazing things about, I guess, technology was, I wrote this a few days ago, and then it got posted or came up right after Lapham made his pick. So it seemed very timely. But yeah, essentially what the post was about was looking at those, you mentioned the 20 years, there have been 10 centers taken the first round and just trying to analyze, hey, is that a good value? Is it not a good value historically? How have these guys done? And just kind of summarizing, I'll be very brief. The majority is, yes, it is well worth it because 9 of the 10 have become very good, solid, productive players. I mean, you've had some elite guys there like Mangold and Travis Frederick. Alex Mack, I think, was very good. Ryan Kelly, I think, has a chance to be really good. Pouncy has had multiple All-Pros. Eric Wood, local Cincinnati guy, was really good. You mentioned Damian Woody. Even guys like Jeff Fain were decent. Maybe not when he was in Cincinnati, but that was the tail end of his career. He was fair. And the only bust in that group was really Cameron Irving. And if you look at him, he was a guy that went from defensive tackle to offensive tackle and then went from offensive tackle to center right before he was drafted. So he was more drafted on athleticism and upside, which I think Bengals fans, you might think of Boyhe and kind of a similar situation. He obviously didn't work out, but the guys that were true actual centers were anywhere from, long tenured NFL career, 10 plus years to great elite, all pro type guys. So if that guy's there in the first round, it's kind of silly to not take him just because it's a center, because the odds are you're getting a very good center. You're generally getting your top choice of a center. And so, yeah, in all, just to kind of cut it short, I think that it's well worth it if that's the route they go. And I'll turn it back over to you, Anthony, because I think we have our guest has appeared. Anthony, you're muted.
Awesome. James Rapien. James Rapien. Yeah, gosh, I'm a rookie at this. James Rapien is joining us, and he is earlier than expected. Gosh, this guy, I got to tell you, this guy has come up clutch tonight, guys. And, poor guy, I got a hold of him early in the day. And I gave him the wrong start time of the show, and he was still accommodating. And then I corrected with the right time. And guy is he had a personal thing to attend to tonight, and he still came on the show to talk about the NFL draft. And we'll have him on as long or as little as he wants.
I'm free. Anthony, it's draft time, man. It's a holiday. Let's celebrate.
That's right. We called it kind of Christmas Eve for the NFL draft. I'm joined by James Rapien of ESPN Cincinnati and the Locked On Bengals podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me. It was no big deal at all. 11:30 though. I was like, oh, we can do 11:30.
Yeah.
No, you're fine, man. You're fine. No, it's
long day on my end too, man. So
that's the thing, man. I think it's been long for all of us because we've been talking about centers and draft prospects for months now, and now it's finally here. I think anybody that pays attention to the draft is probably pretty exhausted.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for showing up and being here to talk about the NFL draft. There's a lot to sort out here. I'm kind of struggling on where to start. I guess I will start with you on the centers because you mentioned that, and that seems to be the kind of the topic du jour, to use a sort of a Dumb and Dumber line there. There's the big three. We talked about it before you got on the air. Frank Ragnow, Billy Price, James Daniels. Everybody kind of has their favorite. The OSU faithful like Billy Price. Frank Ragnow, just in general, SEC guy, seems to be solid, just kind of one of those mean, nasty guys. And James Daniels kind of seems to be the technician, smart, athletic. First of all, what have you been hearing about those three connected to the club, if anything, as we go into the draft? And number two, who's your favorite of the three?
I've heard, and I say this in confidence, and I think it's the reality of it. I think it's Frank Ragnow 1, I think it's Billy Price 2, and then James Daniels 3 for the Bengals. And a lot of that, I'm not going to lie, has to do with Dave Lapham. Some of it has to do with what we've heard throughout this process. They've been high on Billy Price throughout it, and since the Ragnow thing comes out really yesterday is when Lapham makes that pick. And anytime he speaks when it comes to the draft, we all listen. And there's a reason. And it makes sense. It aligns with – Ragnow being one aligns with what a lot of analysts I'm sure you've talked to, I know I've talked to, different – Mike Mayock, for example. I mean, if you're talking national analyst, local analyst, your favorite podcast, every analyst I've talked to doesn't have Billy Price 1 as the number 1 center. I think the Bengals are higher on Price than most analysts are. I think they view him as that guy that can man the middle, and that's rightfully so. But James Daniels, for example, Dane Brugler likes James Daniels the best. A lot of analysts view Daniels the best, and I think he's third on the Bengals board. For me, I would go Ragnow or Daniels. I've been pretty open about the fact that I think Billy Price, especially at 21, he's not going to be the 21st best player. And I'm not a fan of drafting just on need, especially when we're talking about a pretty deep interior line class. And outside of the big three centers, there are other guys that a lot of NFL teams could probably use at center. And the Bengals, going from Russell Bodine, could still use as an upgrade. So I love the idea of Ragnow at 21 if he's there, and some of the other guys like Mcglinchey aren't. But it'll be interesting because I think Ragnow could go 18. I think he could go 17. I think he could go in that between 15 and 20. And if that happens, I would guess if Mike Mcglinchey isn't there, someone else doesn't fall like a Derwin James or someone like that, that it's Billy Price. And then for years, what did we do? Like years ago, Chris Perry is the pick for the Bengals because they liked him a lot, right? Well, Steven Jackson should have been the pick, and that burned them. This could be like that. Billy Price is their guy. They love him at 21. They take him, and he's going to be an upgrade from Russell Bodine. I'm not going to argue if they draft Billy Price. But then James Daniels a couple years from now ends up being the best center of this draft class. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think it's Ragnow, it's Price, and then Daniels on the Bengals board.
So good to know. And I think that's kind of what we're the consensus opinion seems to be that. And you mentioned Dave Lapham, and obviously Dave Lapham is a guy who for whatever reason he's got a good pulse on what the Bengals like to do. He's been pretty accurate on his picks, and I think part of that has to do with the fact that he probably has access to their big board, and it seems like he's pretty spot on with what the Bengals like. So before you joined us, James, my colleague here, Scott Schulte, wrote something up on CincyJungle.com talking about a value of drafting a center in the first round. Now, obviously, this year's a bit of an anomaly. There seems to be 2 to 3 guys we mentioned that could be first-round picks or should be first-round picks. Do you think that the Bengals are best served at getting a guy at 21 at center, or should they maybe wait to see who falls to 46, maybe make a move up a couple of spots if they need to or what have you, but should they be waiting in the second round for a center rather than grab one in the first?
Maybe. It depends on who's there at 21. I think if you're talking about a Mike Mcglinchey being there, I think that's all, you go after him. Derwin James, anyone like that, you go after him. Vita Vea, if he falls, will they be interested in him, the defensive lineman from Washington? So barring someone falling, I'm totally on board with them picking a center at 21. And it will be interesting, though, because I think out of the 3, I did say Billy Price is second on their board. That's just how I feel, and just based on all the context clues. But with that said, I also think he's most likely to fall to the second round. I think if they don't pick him at 21, he could fall to pick 38, pick 39. And then you're talking about trading up for him. And if you're the Bengals, you have 11 draft picks. It would be 10 tomorrow. Let's say it's pick 38, and you want to move up to 39 to get Billy Price. Makes sense if you gave him a first-round grade and you got one of those other guys and you didn't address center in round 1. So it's risky. Do you want to risk not taking your biggest need with a guy you have a first-round grade on like Billy Price? And I fully expect Price to be there if it means, risking losing him. And that's something the Bengals will have to ask. So that's why I mentioned guys that could go top 10. I mean, I'm hearing Mike Mcglinchey could go top 10 now. Derwin James, obviously a top 10 prospect on a lot of people's minds and in a lot of mock drafts. Barring that, and one of those guys falling, I think it will be a center at 21.
James, you mentioned, I guess, the Price being there, possibly being there in the second round. And I think probably with the Peck injury and with the order, obviously it depends on what the other teams do. It's probably reasonable to think that, Price could be there sometime over in day 2. If they decide to sit and wait, let's say Ragnar, like you said, goes 18, and they unfortunately have Daniels as the third guy, so they're not going to take him there probably at 21, and let's say they let Price slide. If Mcglinchey's gone, who of the other tackles, do you think any of the other tackles would be worth that 21 pick, like the Colton Miller that was kind of rumored, or even Isaiah Wynn? I know he's short. I love Isaiah Wynn, but I know he's too short for some people. But would you go after like a Connor Williams or a Wynn or a Miller, or would you say if it's not Mcglinchey and it's not center, it's just whoever the best player is?
I think it's probably best player. Colton Miller, would they entertain that idea? I think so, just because we know how the Bengals value tackle. And he tested very well. Analysts I've talked to aren't a fan of his film. I haven't really heard anyone on most teams, or fans of teams or reporters that cover teams that say, oh, yeah, Colton Miller round 1. That's what we want. So I think that we could see him go round 1. I don't think it would be ideal for the Bengals because they need someone. They don't need another project, even though he tested well and he could end up being really good. So it will be – I would prefer in that example, let's say Colton Miller or Billy Price. I'd rather have Billy Price. But, yeah, you wonder what they'll do if Mcglinchey's gone, if the guys that – let's say they don't feel like Billy Price is worthy of the 21st pick. Well, who is it then? And are you talking about a corner there? I don't know. I think the way the math plays out and how there's going to be 5 quarterbacks, I think, that go. I don't think Lamar Jackson is in consideration at 21. They'll probably pass on – you mentioned the guard, Isaiah Wynn. I don't think he's on their board at 21. That might be crazy. That might sound crazy. I don't think he's a guy that they'll consider at 21. So I think – you always think corners when it comes to Bengals. I don't think it's that likely, though. I don't think there's anyone that stands out a ton unless Denzel Ward fell. But it'll be a guy that fell or it'll be one of the centers. And that's pretty much where I'm at. I know that's basic. Maybe Colton Miller, 5% chance it's Colton Miller. But I think that Miller has a better chance. And maybe you guys agree with this, maybe you disagree. I think Colton Miller has a better chance because he's a tackle, as weird as that is, to go in the top 20 than Billy Price. I think it's a sure thing that he'll be there at 21.
Well, I think one thing I'm noticing is I'm wondering how trustworthy we are because none of us have poofy hair. You have short hair. Anthony has short hair. I have really short hair. I think draft experts, one of the requirements is really poofy hair. So I don't know if any of our listeners are buying much of what we're saying. But that being said, you mentioned Lamar Jackson not being a possibility, which I know some listeners of this are going to love. Some are going to hate. He's very polarizing. So I was going to ask about him. I'm going to pass over that because you mentioned he's not a possibility, and I think he's probably not either. I think Lewis and Dalton are kind of attached at the hip for better or worse. So the question I'll throw at you is, you mentioned Price being there above Daniels in their mind, Colton Miller being a possibility, Isaiah Wynn not being a possibility. Do you think this is more Frank Pollock's kind of his input, or do you think this is Lewis or Tobin, or how much input do you think Pollock's having based on the success he had in Dallas versus these grades or boards being just traditional Bengals front office?
I think he certainly has input, and that's almost the wild card of this draft, not just offensive line wise, but across the board. I mean, you have a defensive coordinator. What does he want? A new defensive coordinator. What do the Bengals want as well? It will be interesting to see how Frank Pollock and what he impacts and how he impacts this draft. I think ultimately he'll have some say. Marvin talked about it yesterday at Paul Brown Stadium. It's going to come down to him. It's going to come down to Duke Tobin. But if you're the Bengals and you've sold this idea, and you guys have seen the quotes positive of it, of Frank Pollock is going to change the philosophy on the offensive line, well, then you got to believe him if he goes to war in the war room and says, hey, this is the guy. This is my guy. I want him. If he says that, then you should probably listen. So I think he will have some say. I think he'll have some impact, but overall, I don't think it will be Frank Pollock making the pick at 21, but he will certainly have impact, and it'll be interesting to see how much of that translates versus Paul Alexander, because in the past, it's bench press reps. Oh, this guy bench pressed a lot. Paul Alexander's interested. I bet you he loves Colton Miller. Like Colton Miller might go to the Cowboys at 19 now if he has his sense. So it'll be interesting. It's the unknown, and that's the one part about this draft that I'm not sure anyone can answer, and we won't really know until we see it.
Talk about irony, because Paul Alexander loves the bench press, loves his offensive linemen to have that strong upper body, strong chest. Billy Price partially tears a pectoral muscle during the bench press. And, obviously Paul Alexander's not with the Bengals anymore, but just kind of a weird series of events. Obviously, contributing to that is the fact that Frank Pollock went from Dallas to Cincinnati and Paul Alexander went from Cincinnati to Dallas. So there's just like this weird series of events that's occurring here. We're talking with James Rapien with ESPN Cincinnati and the Locked On Bengals podcast. He has come up clutch for our program tonight, joining us at the last minute. I gave him a last-minute request, and he graciously accepted and came on the program, so we appreciate that. James, kind of a general question here, and I guess it has to do a little bit with the Bengals' needs and, certain positions we've really looked at a lot because of the roster, but just in general, some of your favorite prospects.
Some of my favorite prospects. Wow, it starts.
Yeah, regardless of position.
Yeah, it starts with Mike Mcglinchey. I want him, and it's weird. It's weird that I want him now, because if they were still at 12 and they didn't have Cordy Glenn, I think I would hate the idea of Mike Mcglinchey becoming a Bengal with the 12th pick. But the idea of them failing the right tackle need, locking that up for up to 5 years, is so appealing to me. Opposite Cordy Glenn on the left side, I think there will be centers available in round 2. Maybe they can trade up. At my mock draft at LockedOnBengals.com, that's what I have them doing. I have them trading up to get their center, and I think that's a realistic possibility. And in an ideal world, when you're talking about stacking talent and completely turning a weakness that the offensive line has been over the past couple of years into a strength, that would be it. As far as other prospects, some people that are familiar with me might be shocked at this. I don't love really any of the top wide receivers, None of them stand out to me. None of them scream, go get them. If the Bengals are in the market for a quarterback, I would love this draft because there's multiple that I like. I like Baker Mayfield a lot. I like Josh Rosen a lot. As far as prospects, round 2 through 4, I think the Bengals need to look at the safety spot. I think a Ronnie Harrison from Alabama should be on their board. Justin Reed from Stanford. The reason a couple weeks ago Eric Reed makes all the headlines and the Bengals are in the headlines, I don't think they were ever signing Eric Reed before the draft. I had heard months ago, about a month ago, I'll say about a month ago, they were done. After the Preston Brown signing, they were done in free agency until post-draft. And I think part of the Eric Reed, getting to know him, seeing about what he can do, and you've met with all these safety prospects. If you don't get one of them, one of the top guys, then maybe you can circle back and get him in free agency, or maybe a Kenny Vaccaro as well. So I think ideally the Bengals would like to address safety now with one of these rookies. Maybe it's at 46. I could see Justin Reed falling to 46 from Stanford. Maybe it's later. So that's as far as safety, I like a few of the safety prospects. Harrison stands out to me, and so does Justin Reed.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't realize we were switched up. Okay. So you mentioned Mcglinchey. Really like Mcglinchey. Let's say Mcglinchey falls for whatever reason. They draft Mcglinchey, or let's say it's even Colton Miller for who knows why. But let's say it's one of those guys. Or so now you have your right tackle locked up. Obviously, Cordy Glenn is on the left. You're probably not moving Bowling. Let's say they get their center in the 2nd round or 3rd round or whoever it would be. What do you do if you are setting the roster come September with Fisher, Obuehi, Hart, and then I guess also Westerman, Redmond, Hopkins? You now have a glut of probably 5 or 6 guys all fighting probably for that right guard spot or a bunch of backup spots. And so I guess my question is, how would you sort through all that?
I would let them compete and go at it, and may the best man win at guard. I mean, because now you're talking about, and it would be the same if they draft a Colton Miller. He'd have to compete too. Maybe Jake Fisher beats him out, and that would be fine. It would suck because you're talking about another 1st round pick not starting for the Bengals, and I don't think fans would be on board with that. But ultimately, competition. I think this line has lacked competition the past couple of years, and Christian Westerman, Alex Redmond, I think one of those guys could man the other guard spot opposite Clinton Bowling. So it'll be interesting there, and I think that's the most likely thing. I know it's at guard. I know it's deep on the interior. I'm not sure the Bengals are going to address the guard spot early. That's why I don't have Isaiah Wynn in play at 21. I've seen him, though, fall a little bit if he's there at 46. And I know that sounds crazy, but there's some injury things behind the scenes that I've heard about. If he somehow, some way falls to 46, certainly in play there. So it's just – to me, why not have a competition? Mike Mcglinchey, I think you would hand him the job. Maybe you would hand Colton Miller the job if they feel good about him. But outside of that, I think Jake Fisher competing for the right tackle spot. If he doesn't get it, you have a backup who's actually played in the league. Or maybe Bobby Hart, who's a backup who's played in the league. Same thing with left tackle. Why not? Cedric Obuehi, not a great starter. He's not he might be an awful backup, but at least he's been in the game. He has some experience. So to me, I don't think I would worry about having too many offensive linemen. I don't think they're going to draft a bunch of guards in this draft. They'll probably take a center, hopefully a tackle at some point. And then after that, it's going to be a competition to see who starts. And
I guess I got one. Sorry, I have noise in the background. We have a son we're putting to sleep.
Yeah, everything okay with it, buddy?
Okay. He's crying because you said Colton Miller at 21.
No, I think he heard the earlier Lamar Jackson comment. Man, I think me and my son have a different opinion on Lamar Jackson. Anyway, yeah, he's actually watched all the drafts with me. Where was I? Oh, okay. Yeah. Anyway, so the quick question I had, and I'll get this out. I'll try to get this out quick so I can mute this. Let's say the Bengals, Ragnell goes before them. They don't like Daniels. They decide to sit, see if Price falls. They get to 46. Price and Daniels are both gone. Let's say they feel that's too rich. You get to the third round picks. Let's say at that point, they're like, well, it's too high for someone like Mason Cole. He goes, you get to the fourth, fifth round pick. They're without a center. So at that point, they're grabbing like a camp body or something. Yeah. Do they have, in that scenario, which is very likely depending on how things fall, Bengals fans would not like it, but yeah. Do you think they have, between TJ Johnson or Westerman or Redmond or someone, did they have the future or the 2018 center on the roster? And if so, who would that guy be if it falls that way?
I hope not. Look, man, if the Bengals, and I'll be the first one to rip them if this happens, if they don't get a center that projects to be better than Russell Bodine, then – and they have 11 picks in this draft. They're in a prime position in round one, and that's the risk. Because if they don't get one, then we're all going to rip them. We are. If TJ Johnson is starting at center, and it's not because of some kind of injury to the rookie they drafted, I think we're all going to be like, what the hell are you guys doing? So, and it'll be a deserved criticism. We won't shy away from it. It's their biggest need. It would be like last year, them not drafting Carl Lawson and Jordan Willis. So they have to get a center. If that means trading up, if that means reaching a little bit in round 3 because they get desperate, then you do it. You take Mason Cole. You need someone, and you need someone to compete. I don't think the guys on the roster, you can't go in with TJ Johnson. I don't really think there's a free agent out there either that you're jumping at that could man the hold down the fort for a year. So unless they feel really good about TJ Johnson, I don't think they do, then they'll look at center. And that's the risk. That's the risk if you wait on one at 21. And that's why if they draft Billy Price, I would be a little surprised, but I also wouldn't complain about it, because if you wait, it's a domino effect. And then all of a sudden you might be looking at bottom of the barrel or mid-tier centers, and you don't feel comfortable drafting them. So I get why they wouldn't want to be in that position.
Yeah, it's a deeper class at the position than normal. I mean, there's guys that you potentially could get in the third or fourth round, like an Austin Corbett at Nevada, who, you know, seems like a pretty solid guy. There's the Quessenberry kid from UCLA, seems like a decent prospect. But I mean, if you can get your hands on one of those big three and find the correct value for one of those big three, I think that's you know, obviously where they need to go. And that's really the biggest glaring need, because they don't really have a quote unquote starter at that position at the moment. And I totally agree with you, James, in the fact that I think that the Bengals are going to go, you know, I think they're going to go center or guard early, and then do the opposite at the end of the draft, you know, maybe fifth round. They have Christian Westerman on the roster. They have Alex Redmond, who they seem to like. They've got Aboihe, Fisher, and Hart, potentially tackles. I think they're going to let some of those guys scrum it out for right guard, right tackle, then maybe get their center with a guy that has guard flexibility. We're talking with James Rapien, ESPN, Cincinnati, and the Locked On Bengals podcast. James, we've got a couple of questions. We usually do listener questions on this program, and since you're on, we are going to take some on the air. You've answered some already. I saw that you saw one from Carlos Andre on Twitter. Basically, is there a chance the Bengals screw up tomorrow? I'm scared. I think it's a mistake if we take Lamar Jackson at 21. You know, I mean, there's differing opinions. You had said your take on that. I want to talk about kicker, and that's not obviously a premium position.
Yeah.
Randy Bullock had a decent season. Didn't have a ton of attempts last year, but had a decent season after kind of, you know, a big miss or two the year prior. Obviously, they brought in Jake Elliott. They decided to go with the veteran guy. Do you think the Bengals? Someone in our YouTube chat had asked, do you think they use a mid-round pick? I think it was Austin Tran. I definitely do not think a mid-round pick is in play for a kicker myself. Do you think that a late-round pick, or is it just Bullock or bust? Or
no, I think they should consider it. Look, I get it, the Jake Elliott thing, and I was the one that I tried to poke that bear as much as I could, just making fun of the situation, because I think we all thought Jake Elliott was going to get the job. Hell, I was at training camp, and Elliott missed more than Bullock, and I was like, There's no way they can cut Jake Elliott. He's the future. With that said, I mean, Duke Tobin said he wants to find the next Justin Tucker, which sounds crazy, but I don't think that's Randy Bullock. He's got 1 year left on his contract. If you're the Bengals, you have 3 fifth-round picks. You have 3 seventh-round picks. Let's say you really like a kicker and you have 3 seventh-round picks. Well, would you rather that or some wide receiver that you know isn't going to make the team that's going to battle for a practice squad spot? They might prefer the wide receiver. They might prefer Antonio Callaway from Florida. There you go. There's a name that I think that they could consider who's a top talent later in the draft. But, yeah, kicker, how valuable is kicker? It's very valuable if you can drill 50-plus yarders consistently. And I don't think they should just give the job to Randy Bullock if there's a guy they feel really good about in the draft. That being said, I don't want them just reaching for a kicker just to do so. Randy Bullock kicked well last year. Didn't get a lot of opportunities because of a bad offense. But, yeah, he kicked all right. And even though I was on board with keeping Jake Elliott, I think Randy showed he could at least be serviceable this season.
Yeah, I don't – it's one of those things where it's a year that the Bengals are breeding competition, which is a good thing at a number of positions. And, there are some positions, wide receiver 1 and quarterback, the starting quarterback, probably don't seem to be in jeopardy, at least right now. But, other than that, they are breeding a lot of competition. One kind of a hybrid question of my own, as well as some comments / questions in our live YouTube chat. You mentioned you don't think wide receiver is very high in the draft priorities for the Bengals. Last week about Calvin Ridley. Obviously, Jeff Hobson of Bengals.com put out a mock draft.
Yeah.
That was not received well. To me, his mock draft, he had a 2-rounder. To me, if you flip those picks, I would have been like, sweet, dude. But, wide receiver, I don't think it's in play at number 1, but I think it's going to be in play a little bit higher than most others think. And I think because the return game was a little weak last year after being pretty solid in 2016. You lose Adam Jones this year, who contributed in that respect. And, Cody Core kind of did some things at the end of 2016, didn't really do much last year. Josh Malone, developmental. John Ross, developmental. Brandon LaFell towards the end of his career. I don't want to say that, they're going to draft someone that's going to immediately shove Brandon LaFell out of the door, because I don't think that's the case. But do you see someone, especially with return ability, if they land in their laps, say they get what their needs are with their first 2 or 3 picks, and they can kind of get creative with that compensatory pick in the 3rd round? Can you see them getting a running back, getting a wide receiver, especially one that has return ability? Or do you think that's just a day 3 project kind of guy? Maybe.
It depends. I think at running back, yeah, I think it'll be later. Wide receiver. I mean, if they, let's say at pick 112, they're picking the 4th round. There's a guy they have a high round 2 grade on. Maybe the kid out of Notre Dame, or I'm trying to think, Michael Galloway as well. That's a guy I think that maybe they like. Maybe I could see it round 4. I think that's probably the earliest. Maybe pick 100 at the end of round 3. But ultimately, I think they're going to take probably 1 safety, 2 safeties, a couple corners at some point, at least a linebacker, maybe 2. They're going to look at defensive line and offensive line. With that said, I mentioned Antonio Callaway. They have 3 5th-round picks, 3 7ths. I'm serious. I think that would be a guy that the talent's there. Yeah. At some point, they're going to look at it and say, and maybe it'll be another team, who knows where he goes, and say he could be a great backup plan if John Ross doesn't get it this year. Because if he didn't have all the off-the-field crap, he would be up there. And he failed a drug test at the combine, which doesn't play well. Maybe he goes completely undrafted. But if you're the Bengals and you say you're interested in him as an undrafted free agent, why not just use a 7th-round pick on him to lock him up, to get him here and get a look at him? So 11 picks, barring a bunch of trading up, yeah, I think they take a wide receiver because 11 spots, at some point, wide receiver is going to be the best player on your board.
Yeah, and with Callaway, when you say "quote unquote" off-season crap, there is a lot of it. A lot of it. Yeah, or off-field crap. I should say.
They've looked at him.
Crap. Yeah,
they've looked at him.
And we know. I mean, we try and say they don't like the. It's not always about the bad character guys, but every once in a while they do it.
They moved on from Adam Jones, out with Adam, in with the young guy who has some issues.
Yep. James, if you've got a few more minutes, we're going to ask you a few more if that's cool. If you got to go. We're talking with James Rapien with ESPN Cincinnati and the Locked On Bengals podcast. I guess, and this is something that, and I think he's briefly tending to some personal things for a couple of minutes, but my co-host Scott Schulte brought this up. Who would you feel at number 21? And granted, we don't know how the board falls. I think just based on the amount, there's possibly 5 quarterbacks that could be drafted in the first round, right? Maybe even 6 some people are talking Mason Rudolph. I don't see that, but possibly. Mm-hmm. So that means there's a lot of trades, so we don't know exactly how the board's going to fall. But who would be your worst possible Bengals pick, given need, given value, all of that kind of stuff at number 21 overall on Thursday night?
Oh, man, worst possible. All right, so the way the board minimum is going to shake out, I think that it's probably Colton Miller, because he's a guy that I don't think anyone really thought, especially like a month ago, was going to go in round 1. And if he's there at 21 and they say, let's get a tackle over Price because he graded well athletically, I love Miller at like 46. He's a really good developmental tackle. That makes sense. 21, it would be a reach. It would make me more upset than a quarterback would at 21. It would make me more upset than a cornerback would at 21. I'm dead serious. I would much rather Josh Jackson.
I laugh at cornerback because we know the history there. Yeah. So
right. I mean, even like a Vita Vea from Washington, supposed to be a 2-down player. A lot of people feel he projects to be that, but I would much rather have him than Colton Miller, who honestly, I haven't talked to one analyst who thinks he's going to be this stud, at least initially. And that's why Mike Mcglinchey makes sense, is I think he would be good right away. I don't think Miller's ready for that. And if you're passing on a Billy Price or you're passing on a Frank Ragnow for a guy like Colton Miller, well, then I might pull out all my hair. You mentioned poofy hair. I'm not going to have any hair left.
Now, for the record, one thing I just want to share with our listeners, if they did not catch a show last week or forgot, we asked the same question to a guest last week who was one of the other writers on Cincy Jungle. The pick that would drive you crazy, he also said Colton Miller.
Guess what? Yeah, exactly.
Oh, my God.
And I think, if I remember correctly, Scott, I think a few weeks ago we had Joe Goodberry on. I think he said the same thing. And I think I had Cody Toomey on a few weeks ago, and I think he said the same guy. So I think we're all in the same headspace here.
So if it happens, we riot. Is that what you're saying?
So I guess kind of going with the pick that would drive you crazy, the kind of going the other extreme. Every year we know there's someone that falls who probably shouldn't fall. Like back in 2012, the guy that fell, I think, was David DeCastro. He's this generational top 10 guard, the guy that will never get out of the top 10. He falls the Bengals at 17, falls them again at 21. They trade down and be on that. Anyway, there's always that guy. It's probably not going to be, Darnold or whoever. But who would that guy be for you that I assume you're going to watch the draft or follow it or something tomorrow, at least the first round. And, as those picks start going and you see that guy, like, oh my goodness, like that guy fell. Oh, he keeps falling. Who would that guy be that you could most see falling, that you would, if he were to land at 21 and the Bengals were sitting there, that you would be screaming as loud as you could at your TV or whatever, get up there, take that guy?
Yeah. I have 2. I'm going to give you 2.
Okay.
Both are unrealistic in my mind, one more unrealistic than the other. One's a quarterback, and it's Josh Rosen. And the reason I mention him is there's been multiple reports about how he's most likely to fall. I like him a ton. I don't think, Sam Darnold's not falling. Josh Allen, I wouldn't even put him in play at 21 if he was there. Josh Rosen to me is a guy that could be that Aaron Rodgers. He could be that next guy. And if he falls, and he fell all the way to 21, I would have to entertain the idea. I just would. This isn't Lamar Jackson. This isn't redoing your offense based on a guy's athletic ability. I love Lamar. I don't think the Bengals buy into it. I don't think they'll consider him at 21. If Rosen's there, he might be the first or second quarterback on their board. So I think he's got the most realistic chance of falling out of the big four quarterbacks. That said, I don't know if they would take him. I think it would be really damn entertaining. And if he was there, imagine if it was him or Colton Miller, guys. Give me Rosen. And I know it's unlikely, but that's it. And then the realistic-ish one that could fall, I think I'd give it like a 15% chance, is Derwin James from Florida State. I would run to the podium, get him. They've said how much they want to address safety. And Derwin James could be that safety for years and years. They would get him for 4 years and obviously have the fifth-year option. It would be insane. Imagine, I remember back in January, I thought, and I think I mocked him. I mocked Derwin James to the Bengals at 12. Imagine if he fell to the Bengals at 21 and they plugged the left tackle need, all with the 12th pick. It would be a home run for the Bengals. That's probably my most realistic, where I'll jump up and down and do cartwheels. That is just insane. I think Mike Mcglinchey is still a little crazy, but I think it's possible. I think it's probably 40% that he could be there at 21. So Derwin James, Mike Mcglinchey, most realistic. Josh Rosen, man, that would be interesting, because if they passed on him and he ended up being great, well, we would rip them for years.
Now, because you mentioned Rosen, I'll just throw this out real quick. He is someone I'd say I'm in the same mindset. I think he could unexpectedly fall. I think some of the attitude, some of the other things, but he, like you said, he is a hell of a player. And you look at the throws he makes. If he's there at 15 or 16, or so, let's say he starts to fall, I'd love to see the Bengals jump up, just 5 spots and just secure him. I don't think it would happen. I mean, you have 11 picks. You're not all 11 aren't making the roster. Would you do something like that for him or Derwin, or would you kind of sit tight and just make sure they fall all the way to 21?
Would I? Maybe.
Yeah.
It depends on the price. I don't think it's in play for the Bengals. I think partially because of price. He's a guy they're comfortable with taking at 21. But yeah, I would entertain that idea, because I think it's deep enough at center that you could get your biggest need and address it at 46. And if they're on board, and I stressed that on my podcast this week. If Marvin Lewis isn't on board with drafting a quarterback, well, then why would you? Because at this point, you need the entire organization, the personnel department, ownership on board with drafting a quarterback. If they say Josh Rosen, he's our number 1 quarterback on the board, and he's there at 17, let's move up if San Diego doesn't want him and get him. Then I'm totally for it. But the last thing I want is ownership does one thing and they like Rosen, and Mike Brown likes Rosen, let's say, and Marvin Lewis under a 2-year contract, all of his assistants a 2-year deal, and now they're going at each other almost, and it causes friction. I don't want that. I want to see the Bengals do well this year as well. I don't want it to be a 5-year plan. The Reds are enough of a rebuild for Cincinnati. So that would be my only thing as far as drafting a quarterback. But yeah, Derwin James, absolutely. Go get him if you can. They've missed on some of the top safeties over the past years. Eric Reed is one of them. They had interest in 13, and the San Francisco 49ers traded up. It'd be interesting to see if they don't think it's in play, but if they traded up to get a guy like James.
Yeah, 2005, Aaron Rodgers fell all the way down to number 24, past the Bengals. Obviously, they had just used a couple of years prior a number 1 overall pick on Carson Palmer. And Carson Palmer ended up being a solid NFL quarterback, both for the Bengals and for other teams. But obviously Aaron Rodgers another level there. But that would be an interesting dilemma there with Josh Rosen. And then, you talked about some of the other guys. Derwin James is a guy I don't want to throw big comparisons on him, but I mean he can be used in a Troy Polamalu type of scenario, kind of a joker type of guy, can play safety, maybe slot corner, maybe a swing linebacker guy, can do a lot of different things. And I think that Derwin James could be a very valuable guy for the Bengals. We're talking with James Rapien. We're going to get him out of here. This poor guy, we've been keeping him here. We tore him away from a personal engagement just to be here, and we appreciate it. I'm seeing some other questions about guys who could fall and guys who were mocked to the Bengals somewhat frequently. Tremaine Edmonds and Derwin James being one. Scott mentioned about, I guess this is a two-pronged question for you before we get you out of here, but what if a guy, especially based on Vontaze Burfict's history, what if a guy like Roquan Smith ends up falling to the mid to late teens? You've got those 11 picks to play with. Yeah, you need a center. Middle linebacker is kind of a weird position in terms of how teams value it these days. Mm-hmm. That guy to me is I really like watching him play. I guess my question is, if he starts to fall, could he be either a guy that they look at to potentially move up a couple of spots for and give up a pick or two? Could he be a guy that slides all the way to 21? And if there is, a Josh Rosen, a Mike McGlinchey, could he take precedence over some of these guys, a center? And then, how we're talking about quote unquote changes this year. How much do you think the Bengals have changed in an effort to potentially move up for guys to get quality over quantity and to get guys who can contribute today instead of a Colton Miller, an Orlando Brown, guys that can contribute a year from now, 2 years from now, when Marvin might not even be in the picture?
Yeah, I think Roquan Smith, if he's there, you take him. He's such a stud. He might have been the dream pick at 12. Because in my eyes, I look at the top 8, and if he falls through the top 8, I would be shocked. The Colts could use a linebacker. There's a bunch of teams. Any team could use
the Niners. The Niners,
the 49ers, absolutely they could. So Roquan Smith, if he's there, you run to the podium. Anthony, you're in California. I'll run to your house if he's there. He ain't gonna be there.
You're welcome, man. You're welcome.
But yeah, is he worth trading up for? Hell yeah, he is. And if let's say, would you give up pick 21 and pick 100 to move up 5 spots to get Roquan Smith? I would, because he's a top 5, 6 talent. He's the best linebacker in this class. He isn't Edmonds from Virginia Tech who's got to develop. He'll come in right now, and he'll be a really good player for you. So absolutely, I would move up for him. As far as the change of philosophy, the Bengals being open to things, I think they're open to trading up. I don't know if it'll be, barring something like that, where a guy, a top 5 player maybe on their board, is just falls and they feel like there's a reason to trade up. I don't see it likely. I wouldn't give a high percentage that the Bengals trade up to 21 or trade up from 21 because they feel comfortable with who's going to be there.
Yeah.
That being said, I think it's more likely that they trade up at some point in this draft than trade down. I know trading down from 21 to 26 has been talked about, or 27 to get Billy Price. It's almost the Kevin Zeitler precedent that they set back in 2012. And I get that. I also think they have 11 picks. They're going to try to utilize some of those. They know they don't have 11 roster spots. They don't need 11 players, 11 camp bodies that they can't address in undrafted free agency, etc. So I think they'll try to trade up at some point. That's why if they wait on a center, I say be aggressive in round 2. Go get your guy, especially because I really do believe if Billy Price doesn't go at 21, that we're going to be talking about him Friday morning still being on the board, still being available when round 2 starts.
Okay, one last question I have, and I'll turn it back over to Anthony. So I'll make this pretty quick. As we mentioned earlier, Dave Lapham has a great reputation for always nailing the pick. He always seems to know who the Bengals are grabbing. And you obviously are a great media guy too, Cincinnati guy. So I'm going to see if we can build that for you here on this podcast. Kind of start the James Rapien, history of always nailing the pick. So tomorrow night at 11 o'clock or whenever it is, Bengals are on the clock. This is, James Rapien's chance to become the next Dave Lapham and say, looking back, I got that pick right in 2018.
Yeah.
Who is that guy they take?
It's Mike Mcglinchey. I think a lot of people are hyping Mike Mcglinchey. And I was listening to Peter King's podcast today, and they were talking about how he could be going as early as 9 to San Francisco. And I get that. I understand it because there's a need for tackle. At the same time, Mike Mcglinchey wasn't a guy I wanted at 12. I think he's going to fall more than some believe. And I think that there could be a team that values a Will Hernandez over him, that maybe values a Frank Ragnow over him. I do. And it's one of those things where you got 5 quarterbacks that are going. I think all 5 will go. I think a Derwin James, a Minkah Fitzpatrick, Denzel Ward, there's 8 players, both linebackers, 10. I think if 1 or 2 linemen go, maybe I've seen tight ends at some point go early, top 20. I think there's going to be a lot of unknowns, a lot of trades. I think Mike Mcglinchey falls to 21. And if he does, maybe not even barring anything, because from what I've heard, they love Mike Mcglinchey, and I get why. So if he's there, I think they take him. It will be a slide because he's projected to go top 15, top 18 at the latest. But I think he's going to end up being there. I think we're going to be happy tomorrow night.
So James Rapien's kind of saying it here. So just like last year, the top tackle, I think number 20, Garrett Bowles. So second straight year where the top tackle falls. And I think, Anthony, we can kind of say, we got it here first. Maybe.
Yep.
And maybe not first.
Maybe Colton Miller will go ahead of him. No, we'll go ahead. I want Colton Miller in the top 20. I want Hayden Hurst from South Carolina.
Gone. Already gone. Yeah.
I want the 5 quarterbacks gone. Heck, I want Mason Rudolph gone. I want them all gone.
Don't even tempt him, right? don't even tempt him. Get him out.
You don't want Mike Mcglinchey. He sucks. He's awful. He's awful.
Yeah.
So obviously, Quentin Nelson will go ahead. There's going to be a point where he gets to like 15 or 16, and then we'll all start to get nervous and wonder if he's going to make it. And I could see Baltimore taking him. I could see Seattle taking him. San Diego taking him. There's a lot of teams, so it'll be interesting. But fingers crossed that Mike Mcglinchey falls.
So
go ahead.
So I was to say, so like Joe Mixon last year, a lot of Bengals fans in the second round were kind of had the Joe Mixon countdown, looking to see if he'd fall to their second pick, and then we trade back, and it's like, oh, can he make it? Can he make it?
Yeah, exactly like that. And I think that was really smart by the Bengals because they got an extra pick, and Joe Mixon was the pick regardless.
Totally.
That's who they were zeroed in on in round 2. I mean, that was no secret. That was the easiest prediction in the history of Bengals draft predictions, I think.
Totally agree. And, they got an extra pick. They got him and they moved back, got an extra pick. And, I wasn't a big fan of them getting a guy with those kind of character concerns. But the fact that they were able to move back, get a pick, and still get the guy they wanted, I thought that was pretty savvy. So Mike Mcglinchey, I think, that's the one I mentioned earlier. That's the one scenario I see where I don't see the Bengals taking one offensive lineman and then potentially another offensive lineman in day 2 right after that. That is the one scenario where if they get a tackle like Mike Mcglinchey and then there's, a center sitting there that they like at 46, that's the one scenario I see. I guess for my final question for you, James, I'm going to build off of my co-host here. Who do you see as some of the guys? Because I don't want to sit here and go, hey, give me a 7-round mock with 11 picks because that's ridiculous. But maybe some of the guys that you see that they could be looking at. Say they get Mcglinchey at 21, like you're kind of thinking or hoping, and then day 2 they've got 3 picks. Where do they go? Linebacker, defensive tackle, defensive back. Give me some names that you think might be a mini James Rapien mock draft for the other 3 picks on night 2.
I think safety will certainly be in play night 2. I think defensive tackle will be in play night 2. And I got a couple names for you. Justin Reed from Stanford, certainly. Yeah. Ronnie Harrison from Alabama, 2 safeties I think they like, and that we should be on the lookout for. As far as other positions, And you might be surprised here. Hayden Hurst, I mentioned him once. If he's there at 46, I've heard they like him. Now, maybe I got some bad info. I think that he could be in play at 46, depending on how the board looks, depending on what they do at 21. And then you're talking about there's his name escapes me right now. Maybe you guys know the linebacker from Texas. I think he could be in play in round 3. I think linebacker is certainly a spot they want to address at some point, but it's deep. It's deep, and that's the thing is I wonder how they're going to go about this, because I keep hearing how cornerbacks deep, safeties deep, linebackers deep. There's some defensive tackles they can use. Okay, well, you have to pick at some point. So that's why, especially if they go Mcglinchey, I'm in favor of trying to get that center at 46 and then addressing everything else. I think 46 is the prime value spot for a center. But if they get one in round 1, who knows what happens? Who knows how the board shakes out? But those are just some of the names. I should have got my book out and stuff. I got a bunch of other names as well, but those are the ones that come to mind off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, I can't blame you, man. We tore you away from dinner. It's not quite 11:30 p.m. Eastern, but I mean, it's up there. You're the man, buddy. You are welcome on this program anytime. If you want professionalism, great audio, and great insight, you go listen to Locked On Bengals podcast with James Rapien. If you want me being staticky and guys talking over each other, you can come to the Orange and Black Insider. But James, you are awesome. How can people follow you? How can people get your material and all that good stuff?
I just pulled up my spreadsheet for a second. I'm going to name a couple more names before I let you go. One's a guy with character stuff. It's Arden Key, and I don't know why it slipped my mind. That's a guy I think in round 3 they could consider. Malik Jefferson is the guy from Texas.
Yep.
And then if they don't take a tackle in round 1, Orlando Brown is certainly a guy we all know they are at least interested in. They've met with him a couple times, the tackle from Oklahoma. So those are some other guys to be on the lookout for. But on Twitter, at James Rapien, I host a daily show. We do a lot of Bengals, do some Reds as well. ESPN 1530 in Cincinnati, noon to 1. I tweet out links. You can listen on the iHeartRadio app as well. And then, the Locked On Bengals podcast, lockedonbengals.com. And whatever, man. You do great work. You guys do great work. It's not staticky. And if it is, maybe it's my bad internet.
No, it's probably mine, but I appreciate the compliment. And can't thank you enough for jumping on with late notice today. And if there's anything you need, let me know. I'm happy to help you out and promote what you do, because you do awesome work. And obviously you're a big presence in the Cincinnati area. And we are so ecstatic that you decided to join us. We've had a great group of guests, and luckily we've kind of had this little brethren of great Bengals people, including yourself and Joe Goodberry, Cody Toomey, a lot of good guys that know about the Bengals, know about the draft, and we're very excited. We hope to have you on. I was telling Scott before the program, I think it's been since last summer since you've been on the program. So it's been too long. I apologize it's been that long, but I am so grateful that you came on tonight. Thanks so much, and try and enjoy your weekend, my friend. I know you've probably got some work to do, but try and have some fun watching the draft.
Oh, the draft is fun. Christmas is tomorrow, guys. I appreciate you having me.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
That was James Rapien with ESPN Cincinnati and the Locked On Bengals podcast. Great dude. And he brings it. And he's kind of got the inside of the Bengals front office and what they do. He also has the media side. He kind of blends a lot of different stuff, and he's been great to this program. He's been great to CincyJungle.com, and we appreciate it. So go check out his stuff. You can also get this program, by the way, on CincyJungle.com. You can get our stuff, meaning mine, Scott's, and a myriad of other folks who have been on this program on CincyJungle.com. And this is going to be an insane weekend for Cincy Jungle, so check it out there. Multimedia will also be putting a lot, as I mentioned at the beginning of this show, we'll be putting up some of the videos we've done on CincyJungle.com throughout the weekend on our channels, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, all that stuff. Get it, and we appreciate it. You can also get in touch with this program at BengalsOBI on Twitter and the OB Insider at gmail.com. Super appreciate it. Scott,
yes.
We're going to get out of here in just a couple minutes because I know it's getting late on your end. But by the way, how great was how great was James? I mean, he was awesome, dude.
It's awesome having him on. He is on during the drive time in the Cincinnati area on one of their big AM stations. So a lot of people get to hear him. So it's a awesome chance for people who like listening to him to hear him again, to get some more insight. Because when you're doing a bigger show like that, you're trying to focus on the draft, but you're also focusing on, the Reds, like you mentioned, FC Cincinnati and all these other things. This is a chance to kind of get him, in addition to that, and get just some more in-depth Bengals talk. So I think it's pretty awesome for, anyone who listens to this in the Cincinnati, in the greater 100-mile radius or whatever, Cincinnati that picks up at 15:30. And then also, to get more insight, because you said, like, me and you, I think, could probably talk all day. We added Cody, and we added, you've had Joe Goodberry, and John Sheeran last week. There's a lot of other people who know as much, if not probably a lot more than we do. And throwing that all together, it's nice to get that big mix of all these different voices and all these different insights. And but when they say the same things you say, it kind of, you can kind of like, okay, I'm on the right path. We do need a center.
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't want Colton Miller.
I was just gonna say, sometimes it's affirmation of your work and your opinions, and other times it's like, wow, I'm a lot dumber than I thought. So, but no, I mean, James, great guest, and others that we've had, especially recently. It's been kind of for the most part, we've tried to keep up at least sort of weekly with this program. There's been a couple of lulls in terms of the NFL calendar and our program. So, we've taken a couple of weeks off here and there, but we've tried to bring in some of these guys, especially with the draft coming up here. And I've already spoken to a bunch of them, James included, Cody included, and Joe included, that they will be coming on in the weeks after the draft to talk about the picks and, what the Bengals did. Cody Toomey is actually going to be in attendance in Dallas for the draft, which is going to be pretty cool. So not only will we get his take of the picks the Bengals made, but I'm curious to kind of ask him about the quote unquote fan perspective of attending a draft and seeing what that's like, especially Jerry's world. That seems to be a crazy place. So Scott, before we had James on, you were talking about the value of a center. You went really in depth in that. The one guy I wanted to bring up, you had mentioned Marquis Pouncy. The one guy you didn't bring up was his twin brother, Mike Pouncy, who was also drafted in the first round. Where would you put him? Because obviously Marquis is a little bit. Mike Pouncy has made 3 Pro Bowls. He was an all-rookie team guy. I don't know where you would put Mike. I guess most people would say Marquis is probably a better player than Mike, but not by much. So would Mike be one of those guys that you would say very good, solid? What do you think?
I mean, it's hard to say because he is a Steeler.
Well, Marquis is.
Oh, we're talking about Mike. Okay,
yeah,
sorry.
Mike is the Dolphins guy who just went to the Chargers.
Okay, yeah, I thought you had asked me there. Yeah,
it's easy. They're twins. I get it. I get the mix.
I remember when Mike entered the draft, the big comment that a lot of people were saying back in 2011 was, "This guy's going to get overdrafted because his brother is really good." and back to Alperic A's price, 2nd round pick. He'll go in the first round, and he did. He went 15 overall. I don't think he's a horrible center. I'm trying to remember what PFF gave him, which I know is not the be all end all, and they obviously have their works, but it is something that everyone can kind of use to, put people in a similar boat. Kind of like baseball has their WAR. So I love the idea. I'm getting off track, but I love the idea that they have something like that. And I'm kind of surprised that the NFL hasn't said, hey, instead of letting them capitalize on this and make all this money and get these subscriptions, maybe we should come up with our own version. Now, that being said, Mike Pouncy, and I was using that as to kill some time while I looked at Mike Pouncy on PFF. They gave him a 46.5 last year, which is what they would call their poor rating. So I think that does kind of going with what the expectations were for him at the beginning, before he was drafted, that, hey, he might be a little overrated. He did make 3 Pro Bowls a few years ago. I think since then he got injured, and so he didn't make one that year. I think last year people were like, yeah, maybe we had him overvalued, and it's easy to forget a guy after they get injured. So I think he's and he's going to be, near 30 next year. So at this point,
well, just based on your metric that you.
Okay. So, in that regard, I wouldn't put him in the bust. I'd put him in the adequate, or maybe even the good.
Yeah.
Just because, he is a 9-year career starter. And that is, granted, you could argue Bodine was a 4-year career starter, but that was just one time. 4 years is one thing. It's just because one coach is crazy. 9 years is another thing. And obviously another team has pursued him. And so I'd put him maybe like where, Jeff Fain is, or Damian Woody, or Eric Wood, kind of in that range where it's like, yeah, he's decent. He probably isn't the 15 overall pick if you have to go back and do it, but you didn't get a bust. You got a guy who was, this was a solid guy. He was a productive guy. He wasn't as bad as, a Bodine or an Eric Guychek. He was he's a solid, good player. And that's kind of what at the very least, you want to get those. You would love to have your Hall of Fame or your stud players, but you look back at the draft, and even like in the top 5, top 10 guys, it's very rare to get, that transcendent, LaDainian and Tomlinson kind of insane guy that's going to be a stud for 10 years and go to the Hall of Fame. You're just hoping to get a good, productive guy that, if all works out, they're a little better. And I think that's, kind of where Pouncey kind of fell. That, he's a good enough guy.
Yeah, started I think 5 or 6 straight years for the Dolphins, and now is slated to be the starting center for the Chargers. I've got one quick thing I want to ask you about another post of yours. One more question, and then we're going to get out of here, along with some final thoughts. If you're okay with that, Scott, you good?
Okay.
On time?
Yes.
Okay. So we didn't get to this at the beginning, but the offensive line cheat sheet. Quickly, this is a little self-explanatory because you call it a cheat sheet, but I thought this was awesome because, not only is it just showing, and again, it's on cincyjungle.com for those who have not seen it, but not only is it showing, height, weight, combine stats, all that kind of stuff of players of interest at the center position and other and guards, I believe. Also tackles. Wow, you did tackles, my friend. And some of the top guys, a lot of names you'll recognize. You look at, I recognize for them. Well, I recognize all the centers that you basically did. Ton of guards. Lot of offensive tackles. You put Isaiah Wynn in there. That's a guy who could play a number of different positions on an NFL offensive line. So you kind of break this down for us. Tell us what you're doing here, aside from just trying to inform maybe a casual Bengals fan of some of the guys that could be in play for the Bengals.
Yeah, so like you said, if you go to Cincy Jungle, there is a post called the NFL Draft Offensive Line Cheat Sheet. And you mentioned Isaiah Wynn, so I'll kind of start with him. If a player is projected to play more than one position, I listed them at more than one position. So essentially, it's looking at guys who are day 1 to day 2 guys. I didn't, list all 500, or whatever players. I didn't, list a center from the University of Pennsylvania or, Franciscan University at Steubenville. It's, or even University of Dayton. It's,
Concordia.
Yeah.
Concordia.
Well, which one?
Yeah, I know. Precisely.
So it's they're looking at, who are the day 1, day 2 guys. And so for your average Bengals fan that, hey, I keep hearing these names thrown around, but at some point, I don't remember which one's which. Was Corbett this guy, who was, so-and-so, or this Rankin guy. So the idea was, okay, let's look at this, day 1, day 2 guys. Let's break them down, the centers, the guards, the tackles. It's a nice little cheat sheet. It basically has, some information, their position, the school they went to, like I said, height, weight, length, whatever. The other thing I did was I looked at some of the more common, the more popular sites that people tend to trust. So like NFL.com, CBSSports.com, so on and so forth. I think I threw in like Walter Football and a few others, and looked at their ranking, kind of their grade that they would give. And The NFL one is like, I think it's like 0 to 8 or 0 to 9. So I kind of scaled everything to that. And so the idea was like, you also want to give that. So not only do you know, like, this guy's number 1, number 2, but sometimes it's a jump. It's not really 1, 2, 3. It's like 1, 2, 3. So I wanted to try to be able to show that. So it's like, it's not like Quentin Nelson's like just above, the next guy. Like, there's a sizable gap. And so it's okay. You can kind of look and kind of see where all the guys kind of rank. So based on the consensus of all the different folks. And when they say, oh, this guy's too short or his arms are too short, it kind of shows you like, yeah, that's crazy. His arms are the same length. Oh, he's off by like 1/10 of an inch. Is that really, how much more is he going to reach? But it just kind of gives you, nice little cheat sheet where each group, each positional group on the line is grouped together. And then a quick little write-up, a few sentences or a paragraph or two of each of these guys that kind of, is based on some of the video I've watched of them, plus, some of the guys who know this a lot better than I do, who have a lot more depth and insight, basically have put together their comments. So kind of consolidating that and kind of throwing together, just a nice little concise listing. So when you're looking at it, okay, which one was Will Hernandez? Okay, yeah, that's this guy. And ooh, they're talking about Braden Smith, the guard from Auburn, who I think is criminally underrated, personally, but looking at someone like him. And so it's just it's a nice chance to basically get all this information in one spot. There are plenty of posts, but usually the posts will cover this player or this player. And on draft day, you don't want to have to look up 30 different posts to see, do I like Connor Williams better than, Tyrell Crosby or whoever it is. And so it just kind of throws all the guys together in a nice one, easy to manage chunk. So it's a good draft resource, I guess.
It's a great draft resource, especially for the Cincinnati Bengals this year. And very, very well done on cincyjungle.com on their front page there. Both that and the other post we were talking about, another offensive line post you did in terms of drafting a center in the first round. Scott, this is going to be a question. We're going to do this question. We're going to do one more draft question, and then we're going to get out of here because I know it's late on your end. And this question is going to be a continuing question, probably for next episode, based on what they do in the draft. I was thinking today, and obviously because they have such high picks and a multitude of picks, I'm wondering about the Cleveland Browns, and they can only be down for so long, and they've been down for a long time. They went winless last year. They've got the number 1 pick, the number 1 overall pick, the number 4 overall pick. They've got, other high picks. They have, Myles Garrett from last year, the number 1 overall guy. The general consensus is that the Browns will take probably Sam Darnold, maybe Baker Mayfield. It's a little bit of an enigma right now, but most people think Sam Darnold, Bradley Chubb, the other defensive end. All of a sudden you have Myles Garrett, Bradley Chubb, Sam Darnold, a potential franchise quarterback. Maybe even if it's Saquon Barkley and a quarterback. Yes, they lost Joe Thomas. They did some stuff in free agency. Granted, we need to see what they do this weekend. And I feel like we say this every year about the Browns. Hey, they're going to be scary this year. Hey, look out for them. They may not be, a 9-win team, but maybe a 6 or 7-win scrappy team. I look at it this year and I'm like, I don't know. I feel like if they get the quarterback and they get a defensive end, running back, whatever, in those first couple of picks, they could be dangerous. Are you? I mean, I know Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and even to a lesser extent, the Bengals have ruled the division of late. Are you at least a little bit frightened about Cleveland coming back?
Anything's possible. I think it is possible that they could for 2 reasons. One, no one is as bad as 0-16. I mean, yeah,
right.
I mean, as they say, your record says you are who you are. But many of those games, they either had the lead in the fourth quarter or were very close. It's not like they were getting blown out. It's not Prairie View A&M, where every game's like 50-0. They were in a lot of these games. The one thing that killed them was they didn't have a quarterback. They now have Tyrod Taylor, who, okay, he's not great, but he's better than anything they've had in a while. They go out and they draft a Rosen or Darnold or, Mayfield. Now all of a sudden you have that piece that was killing you last year. So you take away your greatest deficiency, turn it into at least even or a positive, and then you look at all the pieces around there. They probably have two of the best guards in the league with, or at least the best guard tandem with Zeitler and Bitonio, and they do have to replace Thomas, but they do have some good young players. They totally revamped their defense, their especially the defensive backs. The receivers have really been nothing the last few years. Now, all of a sudden, you have Jarvis Landry and, Gordon. Josh, I was trying to think of his name. He hasn't played for so long. The guy kept getting suspended. He's back. Yeah. Corey Coleman's in that year 3, which is kind of like that magical year for wide receivers. And now, all of a sudden, you don't need him to be your number one. You just need him to be a guy because of all these other things you've added around him. You now have a tight end. And Njoku looks like he could be pretty decent. You do have a pair of good defensive ends like with Garrett and Agba. So, yeah, I mean, on paper, they seem to be putting all the things together, and it's a quarterback-driven league. And they had some good pieces, but, man, you haven't – it just shows how much a bad quarterback can really sink you. And that's why these teams reach – drastically for these quarterbacks so early in the draft, because there's not a lot of good franchise quarterbacks, and you don't want to have an awful quarterback. And you can say, well, you can win with an average one. Maybe we've won with Andy before, but you can't have a bad one. You really cannot have a bad quarterback. So you at least have to have a decent one. And that's the thing they haven't had. And yeah, you put that piece in, and with the parity in the league where, one turnover here and there, a bad, call or a fumble here and there. Yeah, they possibly could be, a wild. I'm not going to say they're going to go 16-0, but I do think they could be a wild card contender if everything works out.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if wild card contender means 2018 or not, but I mean, they've had high picks earlier. Some of them have worked out, some of them have definitely not. But two picks within the first 5 overall picks tomorrow night. Then you've got the first pick in round 2, which is essentially another first-round pick for all intents and purposes. You have the number 35 overall pick, which is almost a first-round pick again for all intents and purposes. And then you have another round 2 pick at number 64 overall. So they have 5 picks within the first 65 overall picks, including 4 within the 35, the first 35 overall picks. That's insane.
Yeah, it's like the haul they got for Julio Jones, but it's a matter of how do you use it? Or is this the year they finally use them well?
Exactly. And we could, there are a lot of cynics who say, oh, it's the Browns. It's the Browns. They'll still find a way to screw it up. At some point, a blind squirrel finds a nut, right? I mean, whether it's stumbling on a great head coach, whether it's stumbling on a great quarterback, whether it's stumbling on a myriad of other draft picks that end up building your team, you can only screw up so many times. And I just, I'm not saying necessarily the Browns are going to make the playoffs in 2018, but they're not going to be 0-16 in 2018. I'll guarantee you that. And I really hope that one of those wins that they do achieve is not at the Bengals' hands, because number one, the Bengals can't afford it. And number two, this is going to be a hard team to face, and an increasingly hard team to face based on the talent that they've amassed. And I think they're going to have some big names again this weekend, barring something crazy. But, I just 5 picks within the first 65 of the draft. That's insane. So I'm a little worried about that one. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I mean, unless they do something like take Allen number 1 and then
that's
reach
the one
for someone else number 4, then it's okay. It's Browns being Browns, and we have nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
But any of the other 3 quarterbacks, right now potentially could possibly be great franchise, future quarterbacks for years to come, which is a thing they haven't had since Bernie Kosar. And you're looking 20 plus years. So yeah, you get that. I mean, you have to figure you can't screw up, like you said, 4 of the top 35 picks, 2 of the top 4 picks. I mean, you could, but yeah, somewhere in there, you've got to get something right. And you figure they finally have that quarterback. They either end up with, someone like a Bradley Chubb or whoever you have to think that although was it the Colts or someone years ago had like pick number 1 and number 2, I think back in the mid 90s. And then they used them on Steve Ettman and Quentin Coryatt. And I think neither one was a productive starter in the league for more than like a year or two. So anything's possible.
I don't see them. And I've got a nice little sun strip across my face in case any of you are watching our video live here. I look like I've got like the surfer zinc oxide across my.
It's because you're in sunny California.
That's right. Because it's sunny, but the sun is going down on my end, my friend. And I know the sun has gone down a number of hours ago on your end. I got to say, first of all, Scott, thanks for hanging on so late, and I appreciate it. And I think part of the reason why we've gone a little longer tonight and a little later tonight, not only because we've had a special guest in James Rapien of ESPN Cincinnati and the Locked On Bengals podcast, is because we unfortunately will not be doing a live show tomorrow night. I think by the time, the Bengals could trade up and all of that. Unfortunately, it's going to be pretty late. By the time we do that, I would love to do a show, but just based on a number of different factors, it's just not in the cards for Scott and or I. What I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're going to be doing some Facebook Live videos through CincyJungle.com and that Facebook page. So go like that Facebook page. We'll also be posting those videos and the audio through our channel, so you can download those as breakdowns of the picks, what the Bengals do, what's ahead in the next day for the big weekend, all of that. So check that out, as well as this program as we preview the NFL draft and our big thanks to James Rapien. My personal thanks to Scott Schulte. I know it's not easy to stay up as late as he does for this show, but it's much appreciated. So I don't have to sit here and sound like a goon by myself. I appreciate it.
So fear of sounding like a goon.
Let's get out of here on this and this is your question. We've asked it. We talked about it with James. We asked both, who would you hate at 21 and who would you love at 21? I believe the consensus hate seems to be Colton Miller. The love seems to be James Daniels, maybe Mike Mcglinchey. I think a little bit of a pipe dream might be Roquan Smith. Your hate and your love at number 21 before the Bengals take the stage about 24 hours from now, my friend.
Okay, for someone who asked this question, they really should be prepared to answer. Because you never know what's going to be thrown back.
I'm not judging.
I'm going to use a couple names for each, and I'm not going to use Colton Miller only because I like to be different. People who know me personally would say that, I kind of go my own course. So I'm not going to go with Colton Miller. Even if I thought it was him, I just can't go with him because everyone else is saying Colton Miller. So I have to say someone different. There are 2 guys. I'm trying to find the name of the second guy because it escapes me, and I don't want to sound dumber than usual by screwing someone's name up. And okay, there he is. So the 2 guys who I would, do we have time for 2? Like I'm good for time.
If you're good, you can do 5 if you're good for time.
Okay. The only thing I have to do tonight is, besides put it this way, I have to cut this pineapple and then I have to go to bed. So I don't have. All
right.
That's my reminder to cut that when I'm done on the podcast. Anyway, the 2 guys, the one I'm going to say, and there's no way this happens anyway, but if he falls and the Bengals grab him, he's not supposed to fall, but if he does, I would just be. Yeah, I would not be happy. And you mentioned live podcast last year. The cool thing about that was I hated the John Brown pick. And going in that pick, I was like, not John Ross. I can't remember his name.
Hey,
that's how much I liked him.
Cut. You hated what pick?
Yeah, John Brown, the receiver that was with the Arizona Cardinals. I can't believe it took him number. And That's how much I hated that pick. He was the guy. I mean, and I hated the Will Fuller pick the year before. They didn't take him, but they almost did. And those little injury-prone small receivers that can't get, that are, I was not a fan of that. And I think live on the show, I probably dry heaved or something when they announced it. So this will spare me that. Yeah,
you powered through.
Yeah. Anyway, the two back to this topic. One of them is Josh Allen. I am just not a Josh Allen believer. Not that it would happen, but James Rapien was mentioning earlier, if someone like Rosen fell, you never know. I mean, these GMs could come to their senses and realize, wow, this guy was a crappy quarterback in a crappy conference, did horrible against decent teams. He's big and tall, but so is John Skelton. I mean, he was in Bengals training camp. He had probably a similar skill set. He was a big, tall guy with a decent arm. He wasn't an NFL quarterback. I don't think Josh Allen survives after his rookie contract, unless he gets a camp invite somewhere. He's just a guy I have no confidence in becoming an NFL starter. If he for some reason falls and the Bengals are like, man, this really highly regarded quarterback's there, how do we pass on him? I'm saying pass. You pass on him because he's not that good. So he's a guy I just in no scenario want to fall. So if the Browns take him number one, I'm all for that. I prefer the Steelers take him, but yeah, anyone. The other guy I'm going to say, and I'm going to say this. This one might have a little more. Would probably more disagreement. I'm going to say Rashaan Evans from Alabama, and I'm not saying that because I don't think he's a bad player. I'm just not a big believer in first-round linebackers. There's certain positions like punter, kicker, long snapper, fullback that I don't think are full first-round talent, unless it's a Luke Kuechly, Vontaze Burfict kind of guy who are like those transcendent guys who just when they're on the field, your defense is 10 times better, and they just have these. If it's someone at that level, then I'm all for it because that is just a rare – game-changing wow kind of guy. I think if you don't have that guy, then I just don't see the value in taking that linebacker in the first round because your linebackers, and we kind of saw this in the 90s, anyone that remembers the Bengals back then, they had a lot of first-round pick linebackers, Takeo Spikes, Brian Simmons, so forth, so forth. Their defense was still awful. And the reason was the guys up front were getting blown up, and so the linemen were getting the linebackers. The linebackers didn't have the ability to –
Well, that and the defense was on the field all the time because their offense was But yeah.
And so these great linebackers didn't do they couldn't do much because the guys in front of them were horrible. And you watch the highlights of the Alabama games.
Yeah.
These linebackers look phenomenal because that front four they have are just destroying these offensive lines. So these guys are running around free. And if you have a great defensive line, I mean, I'm a believer that your defense is built from the front back. You have a great defensive line. Even mediocre linebackers they're not going to kill you. I mean, yeah, you don't want a defense that has Nick Vigil and Vincent Ray's your starter. I get that. But I'd much rather have, someone at that level, that linebacker, than at cornerback or at defensive line. So I just don't see the value in a linebacker, weak side whatever linebacker in the first round, unless it's that transcendent kind of, wow, this is that, truly phenomenal guy that is totally changing the face of the defense. I don't think Rashaan Evans is that guy. I'm not sure. Maybe Roquan Smith is. I haven't watched much on him because I just don't think he'll be there at 21. So those are the two guys that I would just hate for the Bengals to take.
Good selections there, Scott. I've got a lot of thoughts on this, and I'm going to try and make them brief. I think Colton Miller obviously is an obvious guy for me to pick as a guy that I would hate for the Bengals to take. And it's not because I hate Colton Miller. I'm not a UCLA fan, admittedly, but it's not because of that either. I think he's an athletic freak. He's huge, and I think the upside could be a Nate Solder type of guy. If you remember when Nate Solder came out, he was kind of a guy that was a tight end, moved to left tackle, and all of a sudden it's like, well, is this guy actually a tackle? Or, I think there are a lot of similarities with Colton Miller in that respect. I just don't like it for the Bengals. I don't like it for the Bengals because I think that the first pick and or first two picks need to be guys that can contribute today, guys that can come in immediately, start and or rotate in and get into the lineup. I hate to kind of cop out and copy a lot of the guys that have been on this show recently, but it's just a guy I don't see I don't see I see the value, but I don't see the immediate returns. And with Marvin on a short-term contract, with this team needing immediate upgrades on the offensive line, Colton Miller doesn't provide that. So he's one. I guess I'll go a little more obvious. I don't like Calvin Ridley at 21. I like Calvin Ridley at 46. I do. I think if he falls to 46 and you've handled center, you've handled tackle or whatever at 21, and he's there at 46, take him. I mean, you're not, to me, Erickson, blah year returning kicks. You don't know specifically. You hope for the best at John Ross, and I think he is going to end up turning the corner with his career. But Cody Core, Josh Malone, a lot of just like question marks. Brandon LaFell, not a long-term answer. So if he's there at 46, yeah, consider him. But I just, at 21, doesn't make sense to me. Another guy I do not like, and this is going to hurt some folks, I don't like Billy Price at 21. I don't. He's hurt. Granted, he'll come back and probably play most of the season, if not all of the season, in 2018. He has a pec injury, and I just don't, you don't want to chance it. You need to give these guys as many reps as possible, especially these new guys. And I think that Billy Price could be a guy, because there are a lot of people who wear the Ohio State goggles. I think that he is a guy that I don't think he'll be there necessarily at 46, but he will be in that neighborhood if the Bengals do not pick him at 21. So, you got to look at value in that respect. A guy I hope that falls to him, yeah, Mcglinchey's nice and all of that. I asked the question of James Rapien earlier in the show. If Roquan Smith is there in the mid-teens, you got to get him. You got to. I mean, you look at what the Steelers have done to their defense, and they always, they've got, they've used their occasional pick on Roethlisberger and Martavis Bryant, all these guys. It's attitude. TJ Watt last year, I thought it was a reach, ended up having a decent rookie season. Ryan Shazier, good player for them, albeit hurt right now. They're just physical. And, Burfict is that physical presence on the Bengals defense, completely unreliable. And, if you have a Roquan Smith and you have a Vontaze Burfict next to each other, granted the snaps may be limited in terms of nickel and passing formations and all of that, that's just attitude. It's attitude and it's athleticism. And, I don't know how, even with the glaring need at center, if he ends up slipping a little bit, that'd be a tough guy to pass on. And, the good news, we've said this before on this show, Scott, I don't think the Bengals are going to use all 11 picks. They have flexibility to move up, back, whatever they want to do. But if they want guys that can contribute today, they need to move up. They need to sacrifice some of these picks. Then you get your center. Then you get your linebacker. Then you get an edge rusher. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, good moves. And Roquan Smith can play, different positions in a defense. He can do a little outside stuff. He can play the middle. That to me is just one of the best guys in the draft. Even if that position is of a little bit of lower value. So, that's a guy I would look at. Those are our takes. What are your takes? You can get in touch with us on YouTube via the live YouTube chat that we do every week. This program is on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, and CincyJungle.com. You can get in touch with the program on Twitter at BengalsOBI and via email, theobinsider@gmail.com. We're going to get out of here in 1 second, but my friend Scott has one more.
Yeah, I gave the guy I didn't want. I haven't given the guy yet who I want.
I didn't ask you?
No, because I gave two guys I didn't want. I actually had a third one. I'm glad you mentioned Price. He is someone that, even as a Buckeye fan, I have watched enough video of him that I'm just not sold on him at 21 either. So I was glad you mentioned him, because he just gets he's good. He gets beat too frequently for my liking for a guy taken that high. He's a high effort guy. He's a strong freak, but he is a little older. Not much more upside. I'd prefer him not to get beat or knocked, on the ground. So the guy who I would like, and there were two, and I'm interesting. Rapien mentioned Rosen because he's someone I'd be very interested in because I think of the top 3 or 4 or 5, he's the one that could fall. And I think it's one of those Aaron Rodgers kind of things that coming out, Aaron Rodgers was kind of seen as kind of like a little cocky, arrogant, kind of like, Jay Cutler. Some people, he turned people the wrong way. Some people liked him. Some people did not because of that. They kind of thought he was standoffish. Some people say Rodgers was one of the reasons he fell besides the salary cap and teams, in the top 20, not needing quarterback, but he's someone that possibly could fall. And if he does, I think you have to run up and grab him because, the one thing we keep saying, during the season, when the Bengals don't win the playoff games or win the big games, it's Blandy Dalton, he's not that, he needs everyone around him to be great. He can't do it by himself. His accuracy on deep balls has been really bad. It's gotten better at times, but it's just not great. He crumbles under pressure. We need that. Well, Josh Rosen could be that guy. And if he's there, if you're like, man, next year, 2-3 years down the road, this is the future of the franchise. I don't care if your coach is on a 1-year deal, 1-minute deal, 2-decade deal. If you have that future of the franchise quarterback guy sitting there, I think you absolutely have to take him. Now, granted, he's probably going to be gone. One guy who I think could be there, who I'd love to see him take, is Isaiah Wynn. And I know he's only 6'3", and that's like the big knock as well. He played tackle, but he's too short to play tackle. But the thing with the shortness is the arm length, and the arm length if you compare him to some of the other guys, it's not that much worse than some of these offensive tackles. He actually has longer arms than Connor Williams, some people think he should stay at tackle, and even like someone like Colton Miller, their arm length difference is only like half an inch between Wynn and Colton Miller. So I'm not seeing the size being a big thing. And if it is, okay, you put him at guard. I mean, on his film, he does not get beat. And he's a Georgia guy. The Bengals love Georgia players. He played in the SEC. Against great competition. And it's like every time, even at left, in the premium position, left tackle, going up against those best defensive players, it's play after play. He just does not – he's in the right spot. He has great technique, form, power, quickness, everything. Man, this guy, he is going to be he's going to be a guy you look back 5 years from now and like, man, how'd that guy fall to wherever he fell? He is a guy I would love to see the Bengals take. I agree, James. I don't think there's any way they take him. I think they would take Billy Price over him, which would pain me. But when it physically pained me, it would just be disappointing. So I guess those would be the two I'd yeah. I mean, obviously there'd be more, but,
right.
There's a lot of unrealistic ones too that barring a photo of them popping up before the draft, doing weed or stabbing somebody, they probably aren't going to fall.
Right. I like Isaiah Wynn also. And, he's a guy that could there are people that think he could play center potentially. So that's kind of interesting. Tackle, guard, potentially center. I like that guy a lot. One of my favorite guys in this class. And, the Bengals like versatility. They like versatility, especially on the offensive line. So could be a guy, even though, as James mentioned, I don't think he might be a guy at 21. He could be a guy maybe that slips to 46, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, the value's too good to pass up. Like in a Boye, Jake Fisher type of thing. I am, whether it's to the Bengals or not, I am very interested to see where Connor, you mentioned him a second ago, Scott. I'm very interested to see where Connor Williams goes. He was a guy for months that was Bengals at 12. Now at 21, it was like, oh yeah, Connor Williams. And now he's completely out of the picture, and I don't hear anybody talking about this guy. So I don't know if he's fallen out of the first round picture. I don't know if teams or insiders have gotten wind that he's just not in the Bengals plans, but I'm very interested to see where he ends up going this weekend. Obviously, I would assume he's a top 50 guy, if not top 40, but very interested to see where that guy goes after being mocked to the Bengals for many months. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. You can get this program on SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, and CincyJungle.com. You can also get in touch with us on Twitter at BengalsOBI and the OB Insider at gmail.com. Do us a favor, subscribe to our iTunes, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and get all of our material. It's good. There's going to be a lot of it this weekend with the draft. As I mentioned, we're going to be putting up some videos that are done through Facebook Live, and the Cincy Jungle Facebook page will be putting those up as reactionary pieces to what the Bengals do on draft weekend. So check that out. And like I said, if you subscribe, you'll get the notifications about all of those videos as they come up, and this episode and everything. My thanks to my usual co-host Scott Schulte. I know it's super late on his end. It's Merry Draft Eve, my friend.
Thank you, and same to you. And hopefully next time we're talking, we are very happy with the things they did.
We'll see.
You never know, but
yeah.
I think after John Ross last year and then Aboyhe a couple years ago, if they're on the alternating cycle, I think they're due for a good one. So
hopefully.
And this seems to be their wheelhouse. They seem like picking in the 20s where they get, guys like the Zeitler and Eifert. And so, when they get those high picks, they maybe get a little nervous. I don't know. So let's see if they can.
They get trigger happy. We'll see. Our thanks to also James Rapien of ESPN Cincinnati and the Locked On Bengals podcast. He was awesome. And go check out his stuff. Go follow him on Twitter. Great guy. And obviously is a local voice in the Cincinnati area and has a good pulse on the team. And we are very blessed to have him on this program. And we're blessed to have you listening, both those of you who download the program and those of you who tune in live. We are very, very fortunate to have you join us, and we appreciate it. We appreciate all the feedback, whether it's, hey, check the audio, or, hey, love the show. We love it all. So keep in touch with us. Keep subscribing. Keep listening. Keep your eyes on CincyJungle.com this weekend. And, Scott, I guess Who Day, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the most exciting thing until, September?
I guess. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy your draft weekend with whatever you do. We'll be coming up with different content, so keep it here and keep it on CincyJungle.com. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend.